Good evening and welcome to Left, Right and Centre on the eve of the general budget, widely expected to be the last full-fledged one before the next elections. Tonight we look at the challenges before the Finance Minister. The economic survey out today says this year's growth will be the lowest in a decade, but with elections looming, can pragmatism and populism go together? Also tonight, another devastating fire in Kolkata today. This time 20 people are dead and once again major lapses are reported. Only one entry and exit route in the complex that caught fire. Have no lessons been learned from the Amri tragedy? I'm Nidhi Razdan. Those will be our big debates in the next 60 minutes. But first tonight, the government's economic survey today has predicted a growth of just 5% for this fiscal, which would be the lowest in 10 years. But it also says the downturn is over and the economy is now likely to grow. The survey has, however, warned that controlling expenditure on subsidies will be critical to this, that prices of diesel and LPG need to be raised. The government's chief economic advisor, Dr. Raghuram Rajan, says these are difficult times and the slowdown is a wake-up call.
Ahead of the budget, the economic survey painting a slightly optimistic view of the economy, saying the downturn is more or less over and that the economy is looking up. As far as the growth forecast for next year is concerned, the economic survey says that we will grow from the 5% levels this fiscal to well over 6%, pegging it at a wide range of between 6.1 to 6.7%.
We are batting on a sticky wicket, but the sun, reflecting our own strong underlying potential, will dry the pitch out.
But the chief economic advisor admits a lot more needs to be done. The slowdown has been a wake-up call to increase the pace of reforms, warning that food inflation will remain a concern. He talks of the need to slash subsidies and do much more to create jobs.
It is very important that, and FICCI has maintained this steadily over the last year, that projects which are stuck need to be resolved because they are a drain on the sector.
Appears it doesn't really generate any degree of confidence that this government is bent upon moving towards a more sustainable, more inclusive, higher growth trajectory.
So all eyes clearly now on Finance Minister P. Chidambaram and the budget, the tough task ahead of him, trimming expenses, increasing revenues and bringing the fiscal house in order. Will he be able to do that at a time when you have your eye on elections and when growth has slowed to the lowest pace that we've seen in a decade? He, of course, will need to widen the tax base to bring in those additional revenues. The economic survey also arguing against increasing tax rates, instead saying we need to widen the tax base. Shrinking wasteful subsidies is something again that will have to be done, especially in the case of fuel subsidies where we need to move towards aligning them to market rates. But most importantly, restoring investor confidence that has clearly taken a huge beating in the last few months. Also encouraging savings and even removing overall investment bottlenecks, which includes land acquisition and other issues that have come in the way of investments. Also the big one, curbing demand for gold. So we'll have to watch out for what the Finance Minister finally does. Will he opt for austerity instead of populism? Will he take care of the needs of voters or those of investors? That's something we need to watch out for.
Well, the question we're asking tonight is whether populism and pragmatism can go together. And of course, you can also tell us the questions you'd like us to ask our panelists tonight. You can log on to your phones or your iPads or to your Android and iOS applications and download the NDTV app. There's a second screen application there where, as you can see there, you'll have all these questions listed out for me to ask, and I will ask depending on how the votes take place. Well, joining us first on the program tonight, we have economist Sajid Chinoy joining us from Mumbai. We also have from the CPI, National Secretary and MP, Mr. D. Raja. We'll be joined by other panelists shortly. Mr. Chinoy, let me ask you first, what does the economic survey in a nutshell tell you about the state of India's economy today? Because it seemed to be a mixed picture. On one hand, you're talking about the lowest rate of growth in perhaps a decade. On the other hand, you're presenting a fairly rosy picture about what to expect in the coming year. What do you think?
Well, I think that the backdrop to today's economic survey is important. We're in an environment where growth has slowed to the lowest in a decade. You've got falling savings, falling investment, a large current account deficit, high CPI inflation. So a very challenging environment. You know, I tend to look less at the point forecast for next year's growth. These are prone to large errors. Last year's economic survey projected growth at 7.6%. The actual number will be closer to 5 or 5.2. I think it's more important to look at the themes, and there were three themes in my view that really mattered. One is that we will need sustained fiscal consolidation and austerity over the next few years to avoid a ratings downgrade to keep inflation low. But that cannot be done only on the back of squeezing expenditures. It will have to be done also through tax revenues and tax mobilization. The second is that the nature of growth in India over the last 3-4 years has been skewed almost exclusively towards government and private consumption. Unfortunately, that's not tenable or sustainable either. So we'll have to find ways to jumpstart investment. And the third theme for me was that there has to be a rebalancing in terms of how we finance our current account deficit, which is very bloated at the moment. We need to attract more flows in domestic currency assets more than foreign currency assets. So I think the larger thematic message today was we need to rebalance our economy on various fronts to restore an element of macroeconomic stability.